science knowledge, engineering knowledge by demographic groups. So stay tuned. Our next 2 years will be sort of making sense of all of these data with the goal of actually being able to say something about curriculum design. So we're working a lot on Improve. As part of Improve, we're doing a few more things that I just wanted to mention. One is we heard from teachers they were trying to use the materials that we developed for classrooms in after-school and out-of-school time settings, and they weren't designed for those. There's a lot of reading and writing, and so based on the field, again, we now have 2 other curriculum that we've developed that are specifically designed for out-of-school settings. One is our Engineering Adventures program, which is for kids at the elementary school level, and one is our Engineering Everywhere curriculum, which is for kids at the middle school level. And those were specifically designed to be put into those kinds of settings. We're working on a huge number of things currently with the team. We're at 43 people. We're trying to figure out how we can do online professional development experiences. It won't be quite a workshop. We're developing a national network of folks who can also do professional development. We just 2 weeks ago started a preschool kindergarten curriculum, so we're going to go down to ages 3 through 5, and so we're trying to figure out what does it mean to engineer with the teeny tinies. We have this huge video library, of which we saw some today, but there's a lot more on our website. We're going to start to look at what we can do to make our resources even more fitting for English language learners or kids with special education needs, digitize a lot of our materials, and of course, continue to do research studies. So our model of curriculum, which started out really as a curriculum development project and very quickly turned into professional development research, is sort of this constant interaction between development, professional development of teachers, and then the research that shows whether or not we're accomplishing our goals and what can we learn to sort of spur the next model. And I'd say if I had to summarize that, what we've learned from this whole effort are sort of 3 big takeaways about curriculum. One is that you need to balance innovation with the realities of what goes on in school. So you can be very creative, but you can only push so far, or its teachers won't use it. So that constant balance between being innovative and recognizing that there are genuine things that teachers are worried about. We could not have done what we did without actively working with hundreds and hundreds of teachers who've given us so much access to their classroom and their thoughts about being an educator. So that's sort of the second big piece that I think contributes to the strength of what we do. And the other last piece I would say is just this constant cycle of revision where we just kept going back and redesigning and redeveloping anytime we got any data, whether it was from a teacher's passing comment, a feedback form, actual data we collected from teachers or student, until we made sure that what we were doing was based in data that was helping us think or understand that it was working. So there's tons more information on our website. I think we're currently up to about 5,000 pages on our website, which is at the top. And if folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them either tonight or by email. Thank you. Stunned me into silence.
You scaled things up to show that you went up to 6 million students or whatever. Are there many changes occurring to what you initially developed? Can you give an impression of that?
Yeah, so the core curriculum has been published and sort of set for a while. Because when you start to scale, you start to make very large runs with your publisher, and it's really hard to make little tweaks or keeping track of it. But interestingly enough, for the core curriculum, there's very little that we found so far that we have to change. There's 1 or 2 that we find. I think we found 2 actual scientific mistakes. Those we've changed. But other than that, they stand. So what we're really trying to do now is think about how can we get better for the next version. But in the interim, what we're focusing on is getting information from teachers in the classrooms about what they want or need. So a big part of the ideas that we have comes from teachers in the classrooms, and they will say things like, it would be so nice if you could help us see what this really looks like with real kids in real classes, because we have no idea. And when you hear that about the 200th time, you say, okay, we're going to take on video. So that was the beginning of the video project 4 years ago. That is an absolutely enormous endeavor, but by the time we're done, we'll have shot every single unit in 2 classrooms around the country. And once you have that library, then you can start to parse it into different ways to show people what does good questioning look like in the classroom. how do you, help negotiate a team? So we have all kinds of footage we can use. So a lot of our ideas, like the pre-KK, again, came from teachers who did not write for kindergarten. Most of those students do not read. And if you don't read, your materials that you've designed for readers don't really work that well. So some of them make modifications, but again, once you hear it about, a couple hundred times, can you please do something for kindergarten? This doesn't work. Yes, we know it doesn't work. We didn't design. So they're really out in the field telling us, and now we're trying to sort of fill those in online, because there's only so big you can make the curriculum guide for teachers, and so now our goal is to put a lot of it online, and then ultimately when we go to the next version, it'll be digital, and that way teachers can turn on or off features that they want to see. So if they're interested in looking at it for younger students or a more basic version, they can just turn that on, and then the other 600 pages will show up if they want to look at it for English language learners. So right now we're trying to collect a lot of data to figure out what belongs in the next version. But we rarely hear from teachers, you actually need to change this lesson. There's a couple little things, but it's so heavily tested that it's not about the lesson, it's about what else they want in addition to that lesson, which I find pretty fascinating.
So how are you funding your growth?
Well, there's a couple things. We've been fortunate from the original development very, very long ago. Intel gave us a very small grant. That's how it started. And then the National Science Foundation has given us a development grant, and they tend to fund the research projects. We have a lot of corporate support, so we've had elements of the curriculum developed with corporate support, but more and more I'm trying to get companies to fund the purchase of the curriculum for their region. Because what schools still lack is the funding to get it, so they want to do it, and then it usually takes about 18 months to 2 years for them to figure out where. So as we go out and talk to funders, I'm just trying to get them to immediately give the funding directly to the district. And the third way is that we do sell the materials. So not the after-school stuff, that's all free, but that provides a revenue stream that we can keep our customer service and some of the activities that we do, there's a revenue stream that comes in. So if we were allowed to keep all the revenue that we get, we wouldn't need another grant anytime ever. But we belong to a larger organization, and a lot of that revenue goes off to the Museum of Science, so we do need more revenue. But theoretically, yes, there's a big enough income stream that we could fund ourselves.
Last question.
For the equity bit, have you found that it's that schools that are traditionally underperforming and under-resourced need more of that support? And how have you, I guess if the answer is yes, have you tailored the support in a way that supports those schools?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I'd say many of our earliest adopters when we started were the underserved and underperforming schools because they had nothing left to lose. They had tried everything else. And so we have some truly amazing stories now that have come out, and they have the state data to show kind of what can happen if you let kids engage in challenges that they're interested in. And so we haven't, I think because we started with many of these principles from the very beginning, there are still some things that we know we'd like to tailor more. Like for English language learners, there's still a lot of language. And that was partly because we were trying to get it into classrooms that focus heavily on reading. But we are convening now this group that will really take a look at how can we make additional modifications for kids for whom English is, they've only been learning it a couple months. For the other schools, because the materials are really available, and they're very basic, we don't hear a lot from teachers that they have to modify much, which again, I find very interesting. Like I thought there would be a lot more, you need to do this, you need to do this, and we don't hear almost anything to that effect, which I find absolutely puzzling in some ways, because I thought there would be more of it, and there's not. So we keep doing research and trying to figure out how we can do it better, but there's not a whole lot that comes from the outside saying, if only you could change the materials in this way. It's more like, we'd like this additional resource that does this thing. So I just find that very odd. I'm not really sure why, or maybe it was so tested that teachers haven't been able to come up with ideas. I don't know. But it's a strange phenomenon that they don't want us to change more than they do.
Is that similar at the secondary level as it is at the elementary level?
Well, we don't do secondary. Oh, you mean for changing materials? Or, I know when we did, I've done a couple other development projects many years ago, they were set up rather differently, which could be part of the problem. We really tried to co-create with practicing teachers and realized that wasn't the best model. The best model is to have them come in and if you have a vision, have them provide feedback. So those sets of materials, there were much more feedback about this isn't working or this doesn't do it now. The other thing we did, these are very short little lessons. Like we're talking about 4 tiny little lessons that teachers usually squeeze in the week before vacation or after testing has happened in the spring. So it's not like we're trying to go in and put in an 8-week block of stuff, so they may be willing to give us a little more latitude that way, but I really thought they would have more ideas than they do about how we should change the existing things. And I don't know, secondary did, but we were doing a whole different sort of kettle of fish, so it's really hard for me to compare those two.
Is it possible that they're just changing things privately on their own
Yes.
for their own individual
Yes,
needs?
absolutely. In fact, we want them to. So we didn't design this curriculum because we think that every teacher should do everything that's here. We actually hope that over time, we can pull back some of the supports or that they don't use them. So we know, when we hear from teachers, they say that for the first 3 years, when you walk in the first time I watch them do it, they have the binder and they read the first question. And then they read the second question. And it's still better oftentimes than what they were doing previously, which is not asking any questions. And then they'll tell us usually around year 5 or 6, they start to feel comfortable with what is engineering. And then they start to develop some of their own material. So we know, and we know from the fidelity, say they just drop a lesson, or they decide they're not going to read the storybook, or they're just going to substitute some other book. So we know there's all kinds of things that are going on, which we find fascinating because the data that came in all of our field testing, there's still significance. So, like, I thought, you're messing with these variables, and somehow whatever you're doing is still coming out the other end it's strong enough to sort of override that. So we're going to be very interested in this fidelity study. Like we have every teacher logging, what they've done, and then we also have actually audio recorded, a large number of them, so that we can see if they did what they say they do, and try to get a sense of, what are they changing, what needs to be there. Maybe we don't need lesson 2. So we're asking actively those questions to try to figure out what they're modifying without telling us, so maybe we can learn from that.
I had a very similar project. We had very similar outcomes.
Great, let's talk.
Over drinks.
Yes, not now.
The gentleman in the back is about to disappear in short order.
Okay.
Christine, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's pretty clear why she was a recipient of the award last year, and the tradition we have is the award winner comes back to give the talk the following year. This was almost not going to happen. She has to be on a flight first thing in the morning. So if you want to talk to Christine,
Like the next 45 minutes, because I have to fly back to Denver.
exactly. But thank you, Christine, very much. The gentleman in back is still serving. If you have tickets, you guys cleaned out the food, the heavy appetizers, very quickly. We're open until 9, but he leaves probably in about